And there's a shot of the Pere Marquette 18 and better days. Again, 338-foot car ferry, largest still missing vessel on Lake Michigan, taken off the books. The Chicora, a couple years ago, the gentleman from A&T Recovery, they're the guys who find the World War II airplanes. They claim to have discovered the Chicora in about 500 feet of water, somewhere between Benton Harbor and Milwaukee. Again, the Chicora was traveling from Milwaukee to Benton Harbor with a load of flour in January 1895 and got caught in a hurricane. And fill us in on if it really is the long lost Chicora, one of the most sought after shipwrecks in Lake Michigan. Let's head up north to the Beaver Passage here, and we're going to go off of Skilligalee a little bit, or not Skilligalee, but Waugoshance and the Waugoshance Point Light, and we're going to sneak over to the White Shoal Light. And then we're going to head over to Gray's Reef and talk about 3 recent discoveries. These were made in 2018. The first one was the schooner Thomas Kingsford. Now, this isn't the Thomas Kingsford. This is a look-alike schooner. With these early schooners, not a lot of them were photographed. So there's many of these vessels we don't have any photographic images of, but most of them were very similar. And this was roughly the same size and built about the same time as the Thomas Kingsford. So in April of 1871, she was caught in ice off the Waugoshance Light and moved about a mile away, and the ice crushed her hull and she sank. They salvaged the anchors and things off her and described her as a filleted ship. She kind of split open. We found her in water. Again, this is from the surface. Very good water up in the Strait of Mackinac. This is within sight of the Mackinac Bridge. There we see a large schooner bottom. Now, something happens with the shallow water wrecks. You don't see a lot of elevation. You don't see a lot of structure left, and those are beat down by the ice over the years. As a matter of fact, in this area, there were big gouges, hundreds of yards long. Ice dug into the bottom. Then a schooner bottom is described as the 25 feet of water. I'm going to make those GPS numbers available on my website later this winter when I do a revamp. Let's sneak over here to White Shoal. White Shoal is the biggest lighthouse in the Great Lakes. It was bought by a couple of friends of mine from Traverse City, and there we are at the base of White Shoal. Again, it's an iconic lighthouse. You probably recognize it, owned by Brent Tompkins and Mike Lynch, and there we are on the deck. You can see her size. Well, when they first got it, I went out and scanned the area looking for this, the WS Lyons, which was lost on White Shoal. Again, this is a look-alike vessel. It was in 1871, a few months after our last shipwreck we talked about, and she got caught up in a storm and thrown up on the shoal there, and they tried to salvage her, but they pulled her off and she sank in deeper water. Now, here's a sonar image of the area. Now we have what we think is the keel over here. Now we haven't explored this far. We've just got some photo images of this area. This we think is the side of the ship when she kind of came apart when she was pulled off there. There's large pieces. Again, there's a diver down there. It's in 50 feet of water. The divers could see it from the surface. The water was so clear that day. Here we think this is the centerboard trunk. Again, which came off the wreck, which fits the piece of keel, which we haven't explored yet. Again, I'm going to make those GPS numbers available. I'm going to try to crowdsource the identification, or not the identification, but the documentation of these wrecks, and hopefully get people to share some video. These are great wrecks for beginning divers, for people who want to explore and get out to a remote area and something nobody's seen before. Let's go over to Gray's Reef. Now, the Walrus, which was lost in 1868, right after the Civil War, on Gray's Reef. Again, same story is the WS Lion. She was thrown up on Gray's Reef during an autumn storm. They tried to salvage her. She wouldn't come loose. They went back next spring and she was gone. Here's what she looks like now. Again, in diver talk, we call these board piles because, again, we see the stem post here. She's broken up pretty good. The hawse pipe, the side of the wreck, there's just a lot of broken up pieces. Again, broken up by ice and wave action. There we are grappled in. This is in 25 feet of water. There's more of this wreck around the area. We just happened to run across it, luckily, traversing the area. And there's more to be found, more to explore. Again, I will put these GPS numbers up on my website. Let's sneak over to Lake Huron. The big find, one of the big finds last year was the steamer Russia, which people had looked for decades. She's about a 230-foot iron-hulled steamer. A big boat, supposedly carrying all types of goods, including possibly motorcycles. So was found by Jerry Eliason and Tom Farnquist. Tom Farnquist, of course, is the founder of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum up at Whitefish Point. And they went out and found her last year, and we're looking forward to more exploration of that wreck site. Let's go back to the Beaver Passage. Probably one that's really near and dear to my heart is the discovery of the Peshtigo and St. Andrews by Bernie Hellstrom. They were thought by historians to be in Lake Huron, but in fact, they did sink in Lake Michigan in a collision, and they're two large schooners, beautiful boats that are laying right next to each other in the bottom of Lake Michigan. And I don't think there's any other place in the Great Lakes where two shipwrecks sit just 10 feet apart on the bottom. So hopefully those numbers will be released. They're in about 220 feet of water up in the Beaver Passage. Onto the book Still Missing, Rethinking the D.B. Cooper Case and Other Mysterious Unsolved Disappearances. It's based on my website, MichiganMysteries.com, and I picked some of my favorite stories. My favorite missing person story is this missing grocery store manager from Grayling, Michigan. This aircraft, which disappeared with that lovely couple, the Blocks, and the Indaste. Much wreckage from the Indaste washed up in the Holland area, Saugatuck, Holland. She sailed out of Grand Haven in 1929, heading for Chicago, and disappeared with a lot of local sailors aboard, and she still has not been located, though I think there are multiple searches going on for her right now. But let's talk a little bit about this airplane. That's John and Jean Block. They were flying from Macomb County Airport in the Detroit area to the Lost Creek Sky Ranch in Luzerne, Michigan. Now, Luzerne is in God's country. It's about 25 miles east of Grayling, and it's very remote. So they took off on July 4th, a beautiful July 4th day, much like the July 4th we just had. Think sunny, clear. They took off and simply vanished. Now, there wasn't any water in their route, which is kind of mysterious. So this has been looked at for many years by many agencies. Again, a small green and white Cessna, and has remained one of the great Michigan mysteries. Let's take a look at their flight path. So they took off here from Macomb County Airport. It's under a different name now. Now, John Block was a fire chief, considered a conservative person, and an experienced pilot. And by conservative, I mean he wasn't a hot dog at all. He was a by-the-books pilot. So he would come up 75 here, remember, a clear day, and then he would turn off and head north somewhere around here. Now, in this area around in here is the Huron National Forest, and the AuSable River winds its way through there too. That is some remote country there, hilly and just very remote. So a couple years ago, I was contacted by a fisherman who said he was on a fishing trip up in a very remote part of the AuSable River, and he said he came across part of a green and white aircraft. And he saw the story on my website and decided to give me a call. I said, oh, please send me the pictures. So he said him and his river guide, who was a retired pilot, came across this piece. The river guide thought it was part of a Cessna, so he looked it up. Now, this was half mile from the nearest two track, so the only way to get to this area was by boat. And he sent me more pictures. Well, I contacted John Block Jr., the son of the couple who disappeared. Now, we became friends. He only lives a few miles from me, and he's a retired Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department detective and a really great guy. And we have lunch at the Flapjack Shack in Traverse City probably every couple months and get caught up and talk about mysteries and things like that. And one thing we always touch on briefly is his parents, what a mystery that is. So I got the pictures and passed it along to him. He brought them to the aviation school at Northern Michigan College in Traverse City and showed them to a bunch of mechanics. And they said, yeah, we think it's part of a aircraft. We can see where the landing light would go, but we're not sure of the vintage. It looks like it might be older. So John felt confident enough to contact the sheriff of Oconee County, who took his own personal boat up and recovered this piece, brought it into town, and identified it as the side of a pop-up camper. Now, we were pretty heartbroken to hear that because we thought we were a step closer to solving the mystery. But, the good news of this is at least the fisherman had a presence of mind when he found something to get a hold of somebody and at least check it out. Because one thing about airplane crashes, the FAA or the NTSB or whoever's investigating, they recover every piece of it. So if you're ever on the beach or swimming or diving or walking through the woods and you come across part of an aircraft, report it to the authorities. It's not supposed to be there. When they find crash sites, they report it. And there are things missing out there. Just outside of St. Ignace a couple of years ago, they found a couple that disappeared in the 90s, I think, or it may have been a while, and they found them in their airplane in just a very wooded area. So we're hoping by making the story known that a hiker, a logger, a hunter, a surveyor, somebody will come across the wreckage of the blocks and we can bring them home and give them a proper burial and get some closure for my friend John. The search for the Westmoreland. I have a brief little video I'm going to play here. I haven't played it very much. Only a few people have seen it, but it kind of tells the Westmoreland story. So let's run this and take a look at it. On December 7, 1854, the 200-foot-long wooden passenger steamer Westmoreland foundered during a winter gale in northern Lake Michigan, taking 17 of her crew and passengers with her. 17 of her crew and passengers survived, however, and stories soon began circulating the Westmoreland carried $10,000 in gold coins in her safe and 280 barrels of whiskey in her hold. 2 decades after the Westmoreland foundered, her first mate, Paul Pelkey, returned to search for the ship and her treasures. In 1872 and 1874, newspaper articles claimed the Westmoreland was discovered and salvaged, her engine and boilers delivered to a dock in Chicago. In 1936, 25-year-old Max Noel and 19-year-old Jack Brown teamed up with an old salt from Frankfort, Michigan by the name of Captain George Waters and launched a search expedition to find the treasure ship. Cap Waters, who actually met the Westmoreland's first mate, Paul Pelkey, during the 1870s, claimed to know the exact location of the Westmoreland. The trio was said to have found the wreck and then used prototype dive gear to dive and explore the wreck site, which they described as a broken-up board pile. The following year, 1937, Jack Brown and Max Noel founded the Desco Corporation. Desco, the diving equipment and salvage company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, went on to be one of the biggest diving equipment manufacturers in the world. The 1950s brought a couple more expeditions to find the Westmoreland. In 1954, Captain Harold E. Van Nyman of Flint, Michigan, searched for and claimed to have located the treasure shipwreck. He said the wreck covered and uncovered with the sand, and also claimed to have recovered a barrel and had it sent out to have its contents analyzed. Sadly,
The following year, 1955, Van Nyman was arrested on fraud charges brought by the investors of his Westmoreland expedition. In 1957, Jim and Nancy Sawtell arrived in Frankfort, Michigan and spent more than a decade looking for the Westmoreland. The Sawtells are best known for creating shipwreck restaurant interiors and shipwreck furniture, which was sold in the Leland and Charlevoix areas. The 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s brought around a dozen treasure hunting expeditions to northern Michigan, but no claims of finding the ship or her treasures. On July 7, 2010, while side-scanning the waters near Sleeping Bear Dune, I ran over a large, ship-shaped target in nearly 200 feet of water. 3 days later, I journeyed back to the site to dive the mysterious underwater object. It was just me and my brother Bob on the boat. My plan was to dive down to the object, and if it was the Westmoreland, film the hogging arches, which would positively identify the target as the Westmoreland. We hooked the object, I suited up, and down the line I went. I looked down, and below me I saw the bow of an enormous ship. I only had a brief moment to look, then I went back to the ritual of clearing my ears, inflating my dry suit, and aiming my camera. I slowly made my way aft, surveying the wreck and pondering if I was the first one to see this in the last 150 years. The forward cabins and pilot house were missing, and I saw the mast broken off about 6 feet above the deck. It was the same diameter as your typical telephone pole. The arches came into view. They rose about 12 feet above the deck, the passenger railing perfectly intact. There was a brace connecting the arches, a round tube about 6 inches in diameter. I reached out a hand and touched it. As I passed by, it was covered in quagga mussels. The deck appeared to be collapsed between the arches. I continued towards the stern. I wanted to see if the engine and boiler were still there, or if she was salvaged in 1874, as a newspaper report said. In the distance, the lifeboat davits appeared, the cranes used to launch the lifeboats. And there was a smokestack base, the smokestack plenum with a boiler right below it, and the engine cylinder right behind that, covered with a piece of deck, and those davits that came about 14 feet off the deck. The ship wasn't salvaged. I decided to go to the very stern, and out of the gloom appeared the auxiliary helm, a perfectly intact 4-foot ship's wheel. A single word raced through my mind: virgin. This was the Westmoreland, and she was a virgin wreck. Over the next 2 years, the Westmoreland revealed herself to us. Her legend, her history, and her wreck site, an underwater museum, an ice water time capsule. The Westmoreland has been lying on the bottom of Lake Michigan, unmolested, since 1854. The auxiliary helm, not a spoke or spindle out of place. It's almost a miracle considering the Westmoreland went nearly vertical when she sank. The passenger railing, still intact around most of the ship. Quagga mussels cover much of the vessel now, hiding details, but giving us the incredible visibility we have in the Great Lakes today. the lifeboat davits. Eyewitnesses say one of the davits hooked the last lifeboat launch, flipping it over, throwing 15 of its passenger and crew into the icy water. They all drowned right here on the stern of the Westmoreland. Looking down, we see the propeller and the rudder. Just the bottom blades of the four-bladed propeller touch the sand. The Westmoreland lies on a very hard bottom. Looking at the stern, we see the rudder with its unusual 2 attachment points. With nearly 100-foot visibility, the Westmoreland reveals herself further. From the bottom of Lake Michigan to the top of the Hogging Arch is a remarkable 30 feet. The white oak construction of the Westmoreland has proven resilient, considering she spent over 15 decades in the bottom of Lake Michigan. A gangway is wide open, her hatch being blown off during the sinking, and we see the passenger deck collapse down onto the cargo deck. Eyewitnesses said passengers and crew members were clinging to the arches as the Westmoreland went down when she sank in that December storm in 1854. Cal Colthrati, a Milwaukee artist, created this beautiful image of the Westmoreland wreck site, showing us an opportunity to penetrate the bow area. With the bulwarks missing, it's easy to enter the Westmoreland. Her portside anchor hanging down, Woodstock aiming towards the bottom of Lake Michigan. A heavy coating of quagga mussels obscures the Westmoreland's oak timbers. The water temperature is 39 degrees as we enter a room that has been unseen by human eyes since over a decade before President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The windlass comes into view, covered in quagga mussels, chain still wrapped around it. Signs of the violent sinking are everywhere. Collapsed deck, pieces of wood laying all about. And there's a large cargo container, probably containing a cargo meant for the garrison at Mackinac Island. Behind that container, a staircase, still intact, rising up to the passenger deck. As we move towards the stern, we see a small opening to the yet unexplored bilge level.
Wow, that's such a fun story. I just had to write a book about it. I was really fascinated by my predecessors' search efforts, the type of equipment they used, the diving equipment, all the claims of it being found. And it's really an interesting story. So that is the search for the Westmoreland. Now, let's talk about what I like to call the Self-Manitou snorkeling trip. That's my boat at the second worst launch ramp in Michigan. The worst launch ramp in Michigan is the one at Cross Village. That is a nightmare. This one's bad also. I mean, terrible. You launch right out on the lake. But that's where I launch. It's like the closest launch ramp to home. It's in Glen Arbor. And that's where I usually go to head out to the islands. So my cousins were up visiting from Hayhira, Georgia, Brenda and Bobby King. and they said, hey, can you run us out to South Manitou Island? We want to go out there and look around. And my cousin Brenda wanted to snorkel a shipwreck. Now, this was in September of 2018. So I said, yeah, the water's still, in the 60s. Yeah, we'll go snorkel. I said, but I got this new shipwreck hunting equipment I want to try out. Would you guys mind if I used it on dragging it on the way out to the island? So he said, yeah, go ahead. So we went out there. Now, just a little review of the map here. This is Sleeping Bear Bay. Sleeping Bear Dune is right here. We launch out of right here, a little town called Glen Arbor, a nice town, a little busy in the summer. And we're going out here to South Manitou. Now, North Manitou is over here. We're heading to the south end of South Manitou. Here is Point Betsy, and up here is Northport. And so this is considered the Manitou Passage here. Now, we got underway within 15 minutes. And this is an actual picture of us goofing around. Within 15 minutes, something came across the sonar. Now, here's a shot of the sonar screen. And there's just a little something down there, but it was enough to make me go, okay, there's something there. I hit it on my GPS, and off to South Manitou we went. Now, North and South Manitou Islands are part of the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. There's a beautiful lighthouse there. There's a dock. There's a town. There's a couple of campgrounds. There's some very interesting things in South Manitou, including some shipwrecks to snorkel. And there's me and my cousin Brenda. We are snorkeling a shipwreck called the Walter Frost. Now, the Walter Frost is a 220-foot wood steamer which stranded November 4th, 1903 in dense fog. And there's a picture of her in the ice right after her stranding. Good looking boat. I like her lines. Twin engine boat, twin boilers. Let's see there. There's another shot of her. We can see the hull here is really starting to become deformed by the ice, which happens with these shoreline wrecks. Now, what I like about this wreck is it's close to another wreck. If we look down here, this is the Frost, completely underwater. But look, there's another shipwreck right here, just a short, a couple football fields. Well, not even a football field away is this wreck right here. Now, here is some video of us out snorkeling as a family. And there's the wreck above, and there's the Frost right there. Again, she's pretty broken up. We can see some hogging straps here, which are iron straps used to fortify the hull. And many of those were salvaged by a buddy of mine, Jim Sawtell, who would bring them to the scrapyard in East Jordan, and he would sell them there, and they would make them into manhole covers. And he said that put peanut butter and bread on his table for his family for a whole year, salvaging that wreck. Now, the above water wreck is a Francisco Morazan. There's a picture right there of me in front of it in my dry suit. A couple guys here. Cal Cothrati's on the left. Our buddy, the diver, Steve Weimer's on the right. Is on the right. You're starting to see a trend here. We like to go out there and take pictures of each other wearing our dry suits. It's kind of a diver thing because we think this is the best condition above water shipwreck in the Great Lakes. So right off South Manitou Island. Now, the story of the Morazan is she left Chicago on November 27th, 1960. She was a Liberian registered steel hull freighter about 250 feet in length. She was heading to Holland, not Holland the town, Holland the country. So she was going to go through the St. Lawrence Seaway. And again, November 27th, she was really pushing the Great Lakes weather. Now, the captain was 24 years old, and he had just graduated from the Greek Navy School. I think that's the same school that graduated the captain of the Costa Concordia. So probably not the place you want your captain to be going to school. So they got lost in a storm and ran into the island. The Coast Guard came out and rescued them the next day, and the ship was left there. It was too expensive to salvage. Here's a year later, and we can see the pilot house, wooden pilot house and bridge up here. Everything's in nice shape. And take a look at the masts. Everything's still there. Still looks like a ship. Still looks like it can float away. Here's a shot a little bit later from the beach. This is a great shot. This comes from the Leelanau Historical Society. In this wreck, you can swim out to it, but it is a little bit dangerous. People have lost their lives doing it, and so it is recommended to be a boat snorkel. Here, again, we talked about Jim Sawtell, who salvaged the Frost. Here he is right here taking this propeller. So he sold that to the scrapyard at East Jordan for, he said, $8,000 back in 1961, which is a pretty good amount of money. That was about a year's salary back then. So he went through and he grabbed a lot of stuff, and everybody grabbed a lot of stuff off this wreck. By the late 60s, you can see the pilot house is gone. That burned in a fire. Allegedly, partiers lit it on fire while they were out there drinking and smoking on the wreck. We can see she's starting to rust up pretty good and starting to give way to the elements. By 1977, her bow had broken apart there. So she's starting to come apart pretty good. By the 90s, the stern started taking heavy damage. Again, that's exposed to the open water of Lake Michigan right there. Again, the ice and the waves over the years taking their damage. Here's a shot of her in the 90s. We can see a major breach to the rear cargo hold. The front cargo hold is collapsed, probably the weak part of the ship. And here we are in the 2000s. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a couple people on the beach looking out over that shipwreck. And again, she kept deteriorating. 2014, look at the stern. Ice came and broke the stern off and stuck it up on this weird angle. We can see her starting to list a little bit. The stack is still there, and we go back a year later, and the stern is completely gone. It's underwater now. Again, the ice over the winter kind of laid her flat. Here is 2019, a bunch of us going out snorkeling, and the following video is from Dusty Cliffman, 2019, and we can really see the damage done by ice mostly, wave action, just time taking its toll on this vessel. Now, we think this is going to completely collapse in the next 5 years, maybe 10 if we're lucky, but in the next 5 years, this whole thing is probably going to collapse and be drowned underwater. So there's not much time that this wreck has left, and it's the newest wreck in the Manitou Passage. Again, there's a shot of her really coming apart, and every year just a little bit more. She's a little bit more beat up, and one of these springs, I think we're going to go out there and she's going to be gone. So about a week later, we decided to go out to North Manitou and snorkel some shipwrecks out there. But on the way there, I wanted to scan that target I found. Remember, I found that target? Well, it was a flat day, but we went and did that, and then we went and snorkeled the shipwreck called the Supply. Now, the Supply is a great wreck. There we are with our friends, the Swanks. We like to go out around the Manitous and snorkel on Sleeping Bear Point and snorkel shipwrecks. It's kind of our thing. There I am and Connor Swank going down to check out the wreck of the Supply, which is a brig which stranded in 1869 off North Manitou Island. She was carrying a load of bricks meant for the blast furnace in Leland. As a matter of fact, if you look to the left, you can see all the bricks are still down there. So this is a pretty cool wreck to check out and snorkel. The water's always clear in that area. It's about 15 feet of water, very close to the island. You'll need a boat to get there. Well, I keep getting off track. Our target. So on the way there, I got better scans of the target, and I came up with this image. Now, one thing I found just amazing as I used a down scan, something was coming off the bottom 90 feet. So whatever these are up 90 feet off the bottom. That is very unusual for whatever it is. I thought maybe, is this a line, a heavy line that is looped back around and it's coming up? You know, what could be 90 feet off the bottom? It looked like there was something down here, something down off the front or back of it, and then this thing sticking out. I mean, what could this target be? I had another image from that trip, and I recognized the shape from a picture I had at home, and it looked very much like a schooner with the masts up. Now, I was looking for a couple of bigger schooners. They would be about 130, 140 feet. There's a couple of them in that area by South Manitou Island that are on my list of stuffs to find. But this was in 300 feet of water. And I'm good at maybe 12 or 15 feet snorkeling, 300 feet. So I called my buddy Steve Weimer. He's a diver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, good friend of Cal Cothrati's and mine. And I said, he's a rebreather diver. I said, Steve, I found this wreck in 300 feet. It's getting towards October. Can you go down and get some pictures of it? And he said, yes, I will. So we looked at the weather that week, the beginning of October, and it was terrible. But Saturday it flattened out. So we went to our favorite boat ramp, and it was completely covered in crap. A 3 foot high pile of seaweed, sticks, dead fish, plastic. So it took us about a half hour to empty the ramp just to get the boat in, but the water was flat. So the following pictures are what Steve came up with. He got down there and he said immediately he saw it was a schooner. Now, not a big schooner. He said it was under 100 foot. Here he is heading towards the stern. That is the cabin right there. Again, a very intact cabin. Now, that's somewhat unusual to have a cabin this intact. Usually they blow off. When the ship sinks, there's a lot of air pressure and the water rushing in. Usually it sinks pretty fast. It blows off hatches. It blows off. And the cabin, and again, here's the backside of the cabin. Very nice shape. And the ship's wheel right here. And still covered in quaggas, but there is the wheel right there and a porcelain handle of some kind that goes into the cabin. Again, pretty amazing. He swung out over the stern and there was a yawl boat. Okay, that's interesting. That's something to think about. We can see as we're coming closer, this sits right at the stern of the vessel. Not very common. Close by, again, we're looking for damage to try to figure out why she sank in very good shape. We're looking for the name back here on the transom. In the masts, look at those masts, fully intact, both of them, going up to the flagpoles. The balls on top of the flagpoles are still there, pretty amazing, okay? Swinging back, heading towards the bow, we see the boom still attached to the mast. Again, pretty rare. Usually when these ships go down, there's crap everywhere. Stuff breaks off, it's a wreck. It's like a car wreck, it's a shipwreck, it's a mess. This one appears to be very intact. Hatch covers in place. Both hatch covers sealed up. There we go. We can see it to the top of the screen. Hatches on, it's fine. All that stuff laying on the deck is all the hardware from the sails. Again, it seems to be like it was under sail when it went down, and all that hardware is laying on the bottom. Well, windlass right there with chains still around it. Okay. Again, not huge. On the mast are sail hoops that used to hold the canvas up, used to hold the canvas to the mast, all there. It's just like the canvas rotted away. It probably took 20, 30 years for the canvas and hemp rope on this to deteriorate. And coming around the stern, we have the windlass. Again, the railing on this vessel, very low, and we'll get into that a little bit. Now, this is nice, the bowsprit. Well, we know it didn't run into anything because usually the bowsprit would be ripped off, and that appears to be very, very intact, including the chain stays. And look at that bow. That is a clipper bow. That is a clue that may help us to identification. Now, what we hope to do is get lucky and find the name of the vessel. So their anchor's still in place, very good condition, and we're kind of looking up here where maybe the name may have been carved in or may have been painted, and the different paint might affect it. So we're kind of looking for letters in here. We're trying to cheat and hopefully come across a way to help identify this vessel. I'm pretty much a shipwreck nerd, and I know everything that's lost in the Manitous, or at least I like to think I know most everything. And this really didn't fit anything we were looking for. Again, the anchor sitting there. Coming around, Again, perfectly intact bowsprit. No damage to this vessel. Maybe we can take a peek and look on the other side. Nothing, just in beautiful shape. No indication of why it sank. Everything seems to be there. The only thing gone are the sails and the hemp rope, which would have deteriorated after a couple decades of being on the bottom. Again, no name there. The ship is in very good shape. So Steve came up and said, hey, this is under 100 feet. We saw it had a clipper bow, and so we started looking, and this is the stern of the vessel. And one thing you do, if you look close enough, you can sometimes see the name carved in the back. Yeah, can you see it? Yeah, that was, I think Brent came up with this one, our buddy Brent, and sent that out. We were looking at all the pictures, trying to identify it, and he came up with this one. I thought it was pretty funny. But that's the only Griffin we like around here. All right, back to the research. So I hit the Metzler collection online. It's a great database, and also used the Labadie collection out of Alpena, Michigan. They're two wonderful online databases with records to over 6,000 sailing vessels on each site. So I looked through and I got lucky. I came across a vessel called the Emily, which is a 70-foot schooner, which is about fits our vessel, clipper bow, bingo. It was built in 1855 in Milwaukee. Of course, Milwaukee Clippers, hey, sounds good. Disappeared in 1857 in April. The captain, his wife, his brother was the first mate, and another couple crewmen went to get a load of tambark in early April and disappeared in an ice storm. Oh, well, that's pretty amazing. Now, one thing we do to identify vessels is we look for steel rope or cable, or iron rope, they would call it back then, iron rope or cable. And it's kind of an identifier. If you see iron rope, you know it's post-Civil War. If you don't see any iron rope, it's probably pre-Civil War. The Civil War is when they started using it, and anything after the Civil War, they either refitted or built with iron rope. It just lasted much longer than hemp rope and was, didn't have to be replaced all the time for the standing rigging. My buddy Paul Ehorn came by and visited me that winter, and we were going over the discoveries we had made over the past couple of years and looking at video, and I was telling him, yeah, this is the Emily, it's pre-Civil. I think I might have a little glitch right here. Hold on, folks. Occasionally we have a technical difficulty, and window is closed. Okay, give me a second to get back here. Okay, let's see if there, we're back on track. So I showed him this picture and he said, oh, no, this vessel has iron rope. That's it right there. I said, no, that's like a fife rail or a pin rail. Or he says, no, that's the shrouds of the vessel. That is cable. And he showed me this picture and he said, look, here's the chain plates, dead eyes. They're attached by hemp lanyards to the live eyes, which are the shrouds. Earlier vessels, of course, they were hemp. That's a standing rigging. Later vessels, they went to the cable, which lasted a lot longer, and they didn't need to ever change it. And he says that is definitely, and I realized I made a mistake. This vessel was indeed post-Civil War. It was not the Emily. It couldn't be. So back to the internet I went. Again, I went through every record in the Metzler collection, over 6,000 of them. I cross-referenced them with the Labadie collection, and then cross-references the one that fit 2 old newspaper articles of all kinds. So this took me about 2 or 3 hours every day for about 3 weeks. And at the end of the 3 weeks, of course, the vessel wasn't the Aardvark or the Betsy or anything like that. Of course, it started with a W, and this vessel appeared, and I thought, bingo, the W.C. Kimball. It was a 65-foot schooner with a clipper bow, which disappeared in 1891, allegedly near Point Betsy. So Point Betsy is only about 10 miles from this location. Again, We'll talk a little bit of the story of the Kimball. The Kimball was home base out of Northport, Michigan, up here. She was traveling from Manistee down here, past Point Betsy, and was heading up to Northport and Traverse City, and disappeared, they thought, somewhere here. Well, the wreck is somewhere here. So that's not very far, and nobody knows where it sank. So here is the story of the Kimball. In early May of 1891, the W.C. Kimball was making her first run of the year. The water temperature of Lake Michigan was only in the mid-30-degree range when the Kimball left port. The Kimball's crew consisted of Captain James Stevens, age 42, the first mate, Charles C. Keel, age 27, their friend, William P. Wolfe, who was age 35, who was along for fun, and Henry Budd. They made a trip to Chicago with a load of potatoes, but Henry Budd suffered a leg injury at the dock in Chicago and had to leave the vessel. In Manistee, he was replaced by a young Norwegian immigrant by the name of Carl Andresen. On his way back, and Carl Andresen was on his way to join his uncle Stahl, who lived in Sutton's Bay. The crew took on a cargo of salt in the hold and shingles on the deck, and they continued on their voyage. The story is that there was a terrible forest fire in the vast cutover along the Manistee River, and that made a very thick smoke covering a long stretch of water. That, in the very dark night, made it impossible to see anything on the water. In the blackness, it is rumored the schooner was struck by a steamer and sank before anyone on board could escape. The steamer was never identified, but folks strongly suspected the Alice M. Gill, which came to port with green paint on its hull, the same color green as the Kimball. The only items found on shore at Leland that season that could be identified as coming from the Kimball were a cap belonging to Charles Keel, the trunk of the Norwegian with letters inside, and a blue hatch cover. No bodies were ever recovered. What we do have are some images of the W.C. Kimball. Here's a harbor shot, and if we look over to the right-hand side, we can see her stern, okay? Two-masted, check. Okay, we see the shrouds coming up. That fits this cabin. Very sleek stern. So we'll take a look at that when we get back to the wreck and see if it has a cabin and a very sleek stern here. Everything seems to check out. Now, this over on the left-hand side, we see the bow. Let's kind of zoom in. Okay, yep, clipper bow. Everything seems to check out. Chainstays. All right, we got boom there and gaff. Here's a shot of her with the sails up. Pretty amazing. And look on the back. We have the yawl boat. And we have a gentleman standing next to the cabin and a couple gentlemen on deck. Look how low that railing is. That railing is only 2 feet high. Perhaps that will play into what happened on this vessel. So we put together a crew of guys to go out in the spring and look at this. There's Brent Tompkins here, the White Shoal Light guy. Brian Dort, ROV operator out of Alpena, Michigan. And Steve, of course, dressed in his rebreather. He's going to go down and film. Cal Throtty, our consultant, he knows quite a lot about sailing vessels and also is the artist of the group. And then me, I was playing captain that day. And here's some video of our adventure. Now, if you look closely, you can see Steve right here, that little dark shape. He's dropping down like a slow motion skydiver, 300 feet of water here. Look at those masts. Beautiful. They come 90 feet off the bottom. Drop down near the stern. Here's a shot from the other There's fire hose camera. All right at the stern. What are the damages? At the bottom, they could be pounded against the stern as it's saying. It was still connected to the tank and never broke out of the way. Very smooth curve on the Kimball. Again, the deck of this man is perfect pictures of the 1891. Look at the cabin. We have a lot of wood we can see there, which some vessels are totally infested with flies. We have some wood showing that isn't infested. Again, looking back from the ROV, we can see Steve approach the cabin. He's going to try to take a peek inside. Now, nobody has seen inside this cabin since 1891. Everything's still, the hatch cover's still there. Boom and gaffs are right where you would expect them to be. There's dead eyes right there. Main blades will be covered in flagas. And no sign of any damage. This vessel wasn't in a collision. It appears to have been under sail when it sank. There, we're going to swing out and look at the ROV. There is Ryan Dort's Blue Robotics ROV down the bottom. He's getting shots of the bowsprit. And we'll get a shot here of Steve and his equipment. That is a rebreather. He's probably got 6 or 7 tanks on him, plus his camera gear. Those lights are 10,000 lumen LED lights, 10,000 lumens speed. You know, he's got his hands full down there filming and just surviving the dive at 300 feet. Pretty amazing. And here he comes. Mainboard long gone. At one time, it was probably painted on the hull there. We did that, the main WC Kimball, there's nothing there. All the hardware from the sail. Great effort. We think this vessel could be raised, cleaned up, and ready to sail in no time. Heading towards the stern. We want to take a look in that cabin. We think if there's human remains in this vessel, they're going to be in that rear cabin. Maybe they were iced in and couldn't get out. Maybe that's what happened. Silver quagga mussels on the deck. Look how low that railing is. It is about 2 feet high, if that. Boy, any type of speed, especially carrying a load of shingles and salt in the hold, you can imagine waves would roll right over that, which may give us a clue to what happened to this. So they had no protection. If they came around and got hit by some seas, there'd be no protection on this boat whatsoever. There's a pump, that pump right there. Cabin and see what this is. It's in the sill. Gonna go to the stern. Again, cabin from this is one of the most intact vessels from the 1800s on the planet. It's just in fantastic shape. It's only 3 years old today. Steering gear right there. A rudder post going down. And the see all the lifeboat. With the strongback still in it, in the oars. Strongback indicates he probably still had the tarp on it when it sank. Now, if you're on a sinking vessel, in sight of multiple shorelines, say 3 or 4 points of land within miles, why weren't they on it? Again, the ROVs kind of sitting on the side, helping light it and keep a track book down there. We could see what he was doing down there and watch him. Ships will look at how close our grappling is. Grappling. Get inside the cabin here. Maybe it's cool sitting on the bottom of the boat. We don't know what's in there. We didn't spend time inside. Minutes. Dangerous. All right, so we're going to call it a dive. We've been 12 minutes and even an hour to press. Here's a shot of Steve getting ready to leave. He's going to take the grapple off with him. He's got to stow his camera, take the grapple off the wreck, and we're going to have him measure the wreck, but he was just too busy filming and looking at things. So we do have a mystery here. We have a vessel with no damage, disappeared in mid-May. Lifeboat still intact, oars still in it. It wasn't accessed, no sign of the crew whatsoever. So we came up with a theory. We think she came around, the W.C. Kimball came around Point Betsy and then Sleeping Bear Point and hit some weather. We think the wind was blowing, the tops of the waves blew off, turned to ice. I think maybe the temperature was in the teens. We saw that this year in April, temperature in the teens. Out on the water, 35-degree water is going to freeze very quickly when it's exposed to those low temperatures. We think the boat covered in ice, and the crew washed off one by one. The captain first, followed by another crewman, and 2 inexperienced crewmen on the vessel. One by one, they were washed off, and it turned the W.C. Kimball into a ghost ship, traveling by itself, where it sank, where it is now, 130 years later. An amazing condition. It's returning to the surface with an hour of compression, and we had a hot cup of coffee up there waiting for it. So, indeed, we know this is the W.C. Kimball. We think she's covered in ice, got caught in a storm, and tanked to where she is now. One of the best preserved shipwrecks from the 1800s. Cal Cothrati created this image of the W.C. Kimball wreck site. Just amazingly detailed and beautiful shape. Cal's a perfectionist. He caught everything, the size of the wreck. And if you look closely, he even got every quagga muscle in the right place. He says there's 543,000 quagga muscles on this painting. And I counted them, and he was right. He hit it perfectly. This image is available at his wreck site, or at his website, though I believe he may be going on a little extended tour here pretty quick. But again, the W.C. Kimball, amazing shipwreck. We found this picture in the Northport Area Museum. While visiting there doing research, I walked in and saw this big painting and said, wow, I recognize that vessel again. It was painted by one of the descendants of the missing men. This is the only photograph we have of any of the crew. This is Charles C. Keel, who was 27 years old when the Kimball disappeared. It had 4 local men on, well, 3 local men and a young immigrant from Norway who was about 19 years old, probably barely spoke English. But these 3 men were well known in the community. Again, Northport's a small town. It was a devastating loss to the community. This picture is, or this photograph is provided by the Leelanau Historical Society. If you're ever up in Leland, please stop by and visit them. There's a lot of great Michigan, a lot of great museums up here in northern Michigan, Empire, Leland, Northport. Please stop by and check them out. Again, two wrecks only a few miles apart. One of them coming apart fast, the other one frozen in time, in perfect shape. It just shows you what weather and time can do to a shipwreck and what conditions can do to preserve them. Thursday, November 19th on WZZM, we're going to announce a new shipwreck discovery. So keep an eye out for that. Again, November 19th, WZZM, I think 6 o'clock. We're going to go over a new shipwreck discovery. Let's see here. Yeah, keep your eyes open for that. Again, folks, thank you for coming out to this presentation. I really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to go to try to appear on the screen and answer questions. Again, thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Ross, are you able to see the questions in the chat here, or can I help?
Let me pull up the chat. Let me see if I can pull up the screen and let's see. Okay, there's a chat and there's a questions and answers. Okay, I've got the questions and answers up. Let's see here. On a couple of, oh, I did, yeah, I see. So a couple of videos had sound, but you didn't hear my voice?
Correct, yeah. That's
Oh.
okay.
Oh, man, really? Did the voice drown out or it just didn't come through?
It drowned out a little bit below the sound, below the music. But I think we got the gist.
Good, good. Sorry about that. Sometimes that happens. I didn't keep the chat up because what happens is I get distracted. Let's see, what is the expedition or discovery you're most proud of? I would think that is the Westmoreland, but always the next one. So this latest one we'll announce Thursday. I really like, but the Westmoreland's probably the one nearest and dearest to my heart. I'm wondering if, okay, there's a way I may be able to turn everybody on. Speaker view, gallery view. I'm trying to think if I can get everybody's faces on the screen. Any ideas on how to make that happen?
I'm afraid not. I don't know if we have that enabled on our organizational account.
Gotcha. Okay, screen share. Maybe I'll see if I okay, no, I guess I have to share the screen. So okay, let me get back to questions here. And there was a question about, there we go. Okay. I think the person above was asking how Ross discovered his passions for these mysteries. I would like to know too. Okay. You know, it started off as a kid. I was really just always interested in shipwrecks, especially the Titanic. And even as I was always better in the water than I was on land. So I was a fish. We had a pool as a kid and I had older brothers and we would sink ship models and then go down with masks on. I mean, I'm talking 4 or 5 years old. And I think that kind of stuck with me, but I was always good in the water and I just became fascinated. And at the school, at our library, we had one of those little elementary school libraries with a few books on the Titanic. And that just fascinated me. And then when I was in my 30s, maybe, you know, I was busy raising a family, working hard. I was in the library and came across a book about Great Lakes wrecks. And I always went to the Grand Haven Beach and Holland Beach. I grew up in the Grand Rapids area. And I was surprised how many shipwrecks are still missing off Holland and Grand Haven. So that's how I got involved with the early days of the MSRA. Wonderful group out of Holland, Michigan. I got a lot of training there, learned a lot, and that's kind of where I learned about shipwreck hunting and documenting. And it is just a passion. If I have anything to do, it's usually something to do with shipwrecks, though there's not a clear connection other than as a kid kind of being interested in that. Let's see, have you explored any shipwrecks near Holland? I've looked for stuff near Holland. Again, I was in the MSRA when they discovered the SS Michigan. Yeah, I looked at vessels, the Moran, what I was interested in, the Hennepin, all those vessels. And it was kind of neat to be involved with a group that was finding them, you know, one by one, all the ships I was interested in. And I think there's more out there to be found. We'll see. There's a couple of gems out there, I think, that are still kind of hidden away that we'll hear about as time comes on. Let's see. Let's see. Who did you tell first when you found this 150-year-old missing ship? So the Westmoreland was over 150 years old, and I became friends with Jim Sawtell, who looked for it in the 50s and 60s. And he's still alive. He's up in, he's in his 90s up in St. Ignace. And we still talk. I just visited him last week, as a matter of fact. And of course, I had to stay out. He's in assisted living, so I stood outside and yelled at him through the door. But I called him on the phone. I went over it on the sonar, and I was pretty sure I had something. And I called him on the cell phone. This was 2010, and him and his wife, Nancy, who was still alive then. And I told him, you know, hey, I think I'm over the wreck. It's deeper than we thought. And so he was kind of there with me, which was kind of neat, having a previous searcher that I was interested in. So he was the first one I called, and then I went home and told my family, and they really didn't care because they're not into shipwrecks. I think they've heard it enough over the years that they just didn't phase them. So Jim Sawtell was very interested, and we're still good friends. Let's see, is there a missing ship that hasn't been completely found that you would really like to find? Yeah, a few of them. I'm not going to give names. I have a few on my list that I would really like to find. Probably the Gilcher up in my neck of the woods off North Manitou Island, which is now the largest still missing vessel in Lake Michigan. So the Gilcher disappeared about 1892 off of North Manitou Island. And again, it's over 300 feet long, and I'd like to find that wreck. The 338 foot car ferry was the biggest one missing, but that's off the books now. So I think that's one I'd be interested in finding. Let's see. Any wrecks in the Suttons Bay area? How deep is the water? That area gets to about close to 600 feet deep off Suttons Bay. There are some vessels out there. There's rumors of things out there. I don't know if I'm going to get on the other side of the Leelanau Peninsula. I'm out in the Manitous, and by the time I cover all of the Manitou Passage, which is enormous, I'll probably be time to retire. Somebody I'm sure will come over there and find something. There is a tugboat that sank in the 70s, I believe, maybe the 80s, that's off of Sutton's Bay somewhere. And I heard rumors there is a schooner that was found by Harry Zeik and his crew maybe earlier, but that hasn't been verified. Let's see, in addition to the Sutton's Bay question, if yes, when did it happen, or any survivors? I am not sure. There's nothing really on the historical record about schooners disappearing in that area. And then in the Petoskey area, not as many in the Petoskey area. They usually happened around pinch points like Waugoshance Point or the Manitou Islands. That's where you get your majority of shipwrecks. That's kind of open water out there, and there's just not too much because there wasn't reasons for ships to collide. Now, there could be sailaways out there that disappeared, but that'll be in due time. We'll eventually cover all the lake, but that might be 20, 30 years. If you find money or treasure in a shipwreck, do you get to keep it? Well, the state says they own it. You could probably win it in court. So if you found a lot of money, you'd probably end up in court battling the state and to win it, or at least get a portion of it. So the question is, yeah, maybe. But the state says they own it, and you would have to fight them for ownership. It has been done. It's very expensive, And I'm on the preservation side of things. I would rather share history and photographs of the vessel or video of the vessel than take artifacts off it. Eventually, I hope artifacts are recovered by historical societies and museums and put on display. We're not there yet, but maybe in the future we'll get to the point where some things that are just going to sit down there and never be seen by anybody, we can bring up and share publicly. Have you ever been worried for your safety as you were exploring shipwrecks? Every time you get deep, it's in the back of your mind that, you know, the next breath is a couple 100 feet above you. So yeah, you have to put it out of your mind. You can't be down there super scared, but oh yeah, I've been in some situations and witnessed things that are very scary. Diving is not safe. You can get hurt even if you do everything perfectly and everything goes, you can still get hurt, but you know, that's the chances you take. So yeah, I have been worried in the past, but it's not anything that, you know, is incapacitating, I guess. Let's see here. Have you ever explored shipwrecks in the ocean? No. I'm afraid if I got in the warm water of the ocean, I might never come back to the Great Lakes. I think I'd get too spoiled. But no, I have not looked for shipwrecks in the ocean, though there's a couple out in the ocean I'm interested in, but it's just logistically hard to get at. Let's see, Kathy asks, are there any shipwrecks in the Muskegon area? Yes, there's still things that are missing and can be found in that area. There was a name of one, a schooner that was a 1/4 mile offshore. I think you just have to scan the area and see what comes up. Occasionally some cover and uncover with sand. One of the first shipwrecks I was involved in, the schooner Helen, kind of appeared and disappeared in the sand. That's pretty amazing. Then out deeper, of course, the John V. Moran is probably one of the best preserved shipwrecks in the world. Between the Moran and the Kimball, those are probably two amazingly preserved shipwrecks right here in Lake Michigan, which is pretty amazing. Let's see, is there a good resource of wrecks to snorkel in Lake Michigan? There are some books. I think Chris Cole has a book out. There's also a snorkeling guide in Lake Michigan. You just have to research and look around. There are more and more wrecks being found. There's Facebook pages, and if you get a chance, look up MichiganMysteries.com on Facebook, or there is a Great Lakes shipwreck webpage run by Brendan Baylod, which talks a lot about snorkeling and newly found shipwrecks found by Google Earth and things. They're in remote areas. They're not in heavily trafficked areas. But there are a lot out there to look at. You just have to dig a little bit. It hasn't been compiled in a while in our preserve system. It hasn't been updated too much lately. So eventually I think someone's going to come through, compile everything, and get all those snorkeling wrecks made public and easy to get at. Let's see, next question. If someone wants to get into exploring shipwrecks, what do you recommend? Do you ever train people to do this? I do not. I do most of my work by myself. I find most shipwrecks by myself because I have to go out, I have to be nimble and be able to get out there when the weather's right and the schedule is, my schedule works. And I think that's tough to have a crew, and my boat and my equipment's light enough to handle myself. Really, you have to, the information is online now, so the exploration part comes in a few different areas. Research, which is just, you basically have to train yourself or hook in with somebody who's a good researcher and then find the information out. And then there's a search aspect, which is side scan sonar. And there are a lot of websites and forums out there that will help teach you do that. And people like Dan Fountain is a great resource with the Garmin side scan sonar, what I use. So there's resources out there to find that way. And then diving, go to your local dive shop. Holland has some great dive shops. I think Ocean Sand Scuba, Chuck Larson, great instructor. His divers are pretty crack when they come out of there. I'm not sure if the other dive shops are around. That's the only one I'm familiar with, I think, that's still around. But Ocean Sand Scuba, great place. And there's a few other dive stores in Grand Rapids area too. They're all pretty class acts. That's where you start to get your dive training, get certified, and then start, figuring out how deep you want to go and what your next certifications will be. Let's see here. Have you ever read The Heart of the Sea? Hearing from you makes me want to explore the shipwreck of the Essex. I think that was a movie. I think I saw the movie. Boy, there's so many shipwrecks. I know they found a few up in Hudson Bay, I believe, that have been preserved in the ice there, out there in the ocean. But boy, getting to those is pretty tough. I mostly stick in Lake Michigan. I don't like Lake Huron. I've had nothing but bad luck in Lake Huron, and I really haven't done much in Superior yet. I mostly stick to Lake Michigan, but those stories of those ocean shipwrecks are pretty amazing. Let's see. Do you know of any information about the boat sinking off Frankfurt, which was mentioned in the TV series Civil War Gold, shown on History about 2 years ago? So interestingly enough, Kevin Dykstra, the star of that show, was up in my neck of the woods a few weeks ago, and we had dinner at Boone's Long Lake Inn. I live right outside of Traverse City, so he was up, and we've been friends for 10 years. And the legend of the car being pushed off, I don't buy it, but maybe I don't know everything. But we've both looked in that area. There are things off of Frankfurt. Eventually, things are going to be announced in the next few years, deeper stuff. So the Civil War Gold show, very interesting. I don't think Kevin is planning on doing a third season, but he's a nice guy, lots of good stories. And yeah, I don't have any more information about that railroad car that was allegedly pushed off. They did do it. The Pierre Marquette 18, when it sank, they were pushing railroad cars off the stern. I just don't know that people would put a fortune of gold in a railroad car and send it off unguarded, if that makes sense. If you have that much gold, you're going to have, you're going to hire an armored truck or some Pinkertons or whatever to guard it. So that's just my thoughts. It'll be interesting if they find it, though. I'll be the first to congratulate them and buy them a beer. Come across it. All right. Well, thank you, folks.
Wow, Ross, thank you so much. This has just been amazing. I think you've inspired a lot of new divers in this area, and we would probably keep you forever if you'd stay.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Again, Holland, that's where I lived in Jenison for quite a while, which is in the northeast corner of Ottawa County, and spent a lot of time in Holland. And again, I was involved with the MSRA early on, class bunch of folks. So if you know shipwrecks in the Holland area, you've heard of those guys. And yeah, that's really where my heart lies, in West Michigan. I just happened to end up north here in the Manitou Passage, and worked out pretty good. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed.
Well, and do let us know if you're ever in the area. We'd love to take you out for that beer.
Oh man, oh absolutely. Yeah, let's hope we get through all this stuff soon. I really want to get out and have a beer. And this is really cramping our style, but it sounds like, hey, 6 months from now, we might be in a whole new world, because I'd love to come down in person and do the presentation. And after this new shipwreck discovery, I have a new talk coming out for next year. So hopefully next summer, next fall, I can do that in person.
Well, brilliant. We will have you back. Thank you so much, Ross. We really appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.